I hope everybody's excited to learn about today's topic, which is educating legislators, candidates, and voters on monetary reform. And I think we'll go ahead and get started without further ado. So my name is Fernanda Lugo. I will be moderating the show tonight. I am the social media associate for the Alliance for Just Money. This special coffee house today is brought to you by the Legislative Action Committee. And in particular, the speakers today are Lucille, Greg, Mark, and Tom. So we'll go ahead and get this rolling. So to begin, just want to go over the community guidelines as you participate in today's coffee house. Of course, the Alliance for Just Money, we're very conscious that this is a large organization and we need to respect all of the differences and perspectives and identities. We strive to understand the experience and viewpoints of others, and we take responsibility for the intent and impact of our words. Please avoid using personal attacks or microaggressions and respect differences of opinion. Our other guidelines are to recognize the social and power dynamics. So just think consciously about your social position. And this will allow us to work across gender, age, education, class, race, sexuality, political language, and other identities. So notice the voices and perspectives of those who are present and those who are absent. Our third community guideline is to be open to discomfort and learning. Acknowledge your values and visions, but be ready to have them challenged. Assume good intentions in others. Exercise respect and compassion in challenging others' ideas, and we can all agree to disagree. It's perfectly encouraged. Our fourth guideline is to be clear and concise. Always spell out your acronyms if you have them in your speech. And it's okay to be okay with silence. This will make sure that everybody is given the time to speak. Also, listen attentively. Make sure you have listened more than you speak. And actively listen before you respond. Our last and final guideline is to respect your own needs. So this organization runs on the energy of volunteers and staff in the community. So ask for help when you need it and give what is healthy for you to give and protect your own mental and physical well-being. Be gentle with yourself and others. So with those conditions in mind, I welcome you to tonight's forum and also encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already to our mailing list and newsletter and all of the goodies that you can get from information about what this organization is doing. We do have promos on social media that have a little splurge about how you can share this subscribe link with your friends, family members, everybody who needs to be involved in this movement, which is everybody. So today's coffee house, as I mentioned, is brought to you by the Legislative Action Committee. This is one of several committees in AFJM, and we all have different objectives and purposes. And as you will learn today, the Legislative Action Committee focuses on getting the bill and the actual action through our democratic process. So among this great crew is Lucille, Eckridge, Tabitha, Jan, Debbie, John Howell, Howard Schweitzer, Mark Pash, Tom Wilda, and you can easily join this or any other committee in the AFJM network by emailing reform@Monetary Alliance. And if you have any questions about how these work, feel free to reach out in the chat as we go through today's presentation. And furthermore, we do have a lot to learn tonight, so please just keep calm, listen well, and save your comments until the end. So I will now pass it on to Lucille Eckrich, who is a founding member of AFJM and a board member, and she will be introducing us to the American Monetary Reform Act. And followed by that, we will learn more about reaching out to legislators and current efforts. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Lucille.
Okay, so thank you very much, Fernanda. And many of you were, if you're a member of the Alliance, you were at our 4th annual membership meeting on July 23rd. And during that, there was a presentation by John Howell on our update of the NEED Act, AMRA, and that is now available for anybody to watch on our YouTube page. And the link is there, but you can just find it on our page. We did email you the link to AMRA, the full bill, and the fact sheet. And what we're going to have on the next few slides is the fact sheet, and I'm going to kind of walk through it pretty quickly. But this is at the top of AMRA, and it indicates it is an update of the 2011 NEED Act, and it is a bill to create a more equal and just economy in which all have a right to employment and a livable income as a matter of national economic policy. Not all we have access to, but that as national economic policy we have. To provide, secondly, a debt-free public investment in physical and social infrastructure. To stabilize the Social Security retirement system, to address climate change, to restore the authority of Congress to create and regulate money, to modernize and provide stability for the monetary system of the United States and for other public purposes. So that's sort of the preamble, so to speak. And very briefly, go back. Yeah. So this is next one. Yeah, here we are. So this is the fact sheet now. And at the top of it, it gives the link to AMRA. It explains that we need sponsors and co-sponsors in Congress, and we need endorsements from civil society organizations and units of local government from all 50 states. And that is the work that we are trying to push very actively with this Coffeehouse. So what does AMRA do? In order to enable government to correct inherent flaws in our money system and to fund the public good as Congress over time defines it, and to gradually retire the federal debt, and to reduce the flow of wealth from the real economy into the financial sector. So yeah, it's now flowing from the real economy into the financial sector, and that's what we want to reduce, that it needs to transfer within the real economy. The American Monetary Act has basically 3 interdependent prongs. You all know this from the mission of the Alliance. And then the 4th one is the kind of seamless implementation of that. So it transfers first the creation of money from banks to the federal government. You all know this, I think, ending money creation by banks through fractional reserve lending or any other means. And this is simply living out the Constitution that we have. You can forward, Fernanda. Secondly, it establishes within the U.S. Department of Treasury an independent monetary authority to establish appropriate rates of new money creation by government in order to avoid inflation or deflation. So that's a matter of the quantity of money in circulation, modulating that. Secondly, it establishes a revolving fund for lending to banks, especially during the transition period. And thirdly, a monetary bureau is established to incorporate as well into the Treasury the needed functions of the Federal Reserve System that are needed to continue, while ending the existence of the Federal Reserve as a separate entity owned by private banks. So this prong has to do in part with being limited by not having the monetary authority as a fourth branch of government. That would take a more significant constitutional change. So short of that, the answer is to have an independent monetary authority within the government itself as part of the Treasury, but not subject to the Secretary's determination. Thirdly, it specifies that banks shall offer two kinds of customer accounts: transaction accounts, like checking accounts, those are used for payment system, and to be kept in bailment, separate from bank balance sheets, and thus protected from possible bank failure. So they are no longer loans to a financial institution where they are housed. They are full money, our money, full sovereign, just money. And then savings and investment accounts that would be used by banks for investing on behalf of the customers whose money is in it, and returning potentially interest to customers, depending on what the market bears. And then finally, to provide the orderly transition from the present debt-based money system to 100% public money system by implementing those three prior prongs. No, go ahead. So why do we need AMRA now? Go ahead. Because we have both a dire need, the same as was there in 2011, the same as was there in 1930, but we also have an unprecedented opportunity today to change our money system once and for all, from a private debt-based money system to a public asset money system. Go ahead and advance a little more quickly, probably. So most people don't even know, and this is what we have the work to do. They don't know that the vast majority of our means of payment today is privately created when we borrow and sign loan contracts. And the problem with this money system is not its fiat nature, as many people think, but its private and debt-based status. As such, it is inherently unstable, unjust, and unsustainable. It imposes a growth imperative, not only on our economy, but through the influence of our money system on other economies too. And the only way to keep paying the interest that debt money bears is to exploit us, to exploit people, all people in the US and around the world, except for the 1%, it seems, and the planet as well, and to continue borrowing more money into circulation. And the role of money in politics to keep this system going is undermining democracy, as it has done up till today, more intensely today now. So we can change it. We can have a market economy, but it doesn't have to be credit and debt-based money underneath it. And we have to change it if we care about the survival of our children and grandchildren and other species on this planet. So why is it, go ahead, unprecedented? Why is this opportunity unprecedented today? And we think that it's because whether we like it or not in the Alliance, some shift to new digital money is coming. And this is what Joseph Huber is arguing in his book that just was published in German. And hopefully will come out in English soon. But people are working on this: central bankers, commercial bankers, cryptocurrencies, Facebook, Amazon, and the notion of stable coins, a cryptocurrency that's based on a national lingo tender. So all those people see the writing on the wall and are trying to figure out the chaos we're in and what to do. But if we don't understand it and we are not aware, we the people, none of these other players are going to work for the public and private good of us all in the change that comes. Something is coming. So forward, please. So if we do understand money and why and how to reform it, we humbly believe that we can, and eventually, whether or not in our time, our day or not, but we can and we will achieve a public money system that serves a public good and sustainable commerce for all Americans and within a global community of peaceful trading nations who hopefully will be doing more or less the same in a timely manner. So I think you went, did you go too fast there? No? Did we skip one? I think you did. No? Okay. Okay, sorry, we didn't. Okay, so what can you do? What can you do? We're going to hear about that real soon. Please advance. Yeah, just keep your cursor there. So keep learning, doing what we're doing in the Alliance about how to change it. And on the fact sheet, we list many of our organizations and websites, keep going, that provide really excellent information. And Mark and Virginia are in the room. And one of theirs is the last one there, the How We Pay for a Better World campaign. We can ask our legislators to sponsor and co-sponsor, expect them to do that, and other organizations to endorse AMRA. And we need that endorsement at all levels of the society. And finally, to join actively the monetary reform movement. Please advance. So subscribe, get your friends and neighbors to subscribe, become a member if you're not, and contact us with information ideas at Reform Ed. So those slides were on the fact sheet, the two-sided one that you were sent beforehand. I'm done with sort of this overview, but the use of this fact sheet is meant to be really for providing to legislators in letters, in meetings that we have with them, as well, if people can afford to print and mail it, the full 32-page AMRA legislation, which boils down to half that number of two-sided sheets. So thank you, and we're going to move on to Greg.
Thank you, Lucille. So yeah, just to mention as well, follow us on social media, of course. You can subscribe, become a member, and don't forget to follow us. So now we will have Greg Coleridge tell us about how you can reach out to your legislators and staff. And he'll be speaking from a lot of experience, because Greg works as well with Move to Amend. So he'll tell us a bit about how these legislative things work. Pass it to you, Greg.
Well, thank you, Fernanda, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks so much to Lucille for that fine summary of AMRA, and thanks to all of you for being part of the Coffeehouse this evening. So here are the basic steps, more or less sequential, to set up and prepare for a meeting with, as sometimes they are called affectionately, our congressional critters. But they are our federal representatives, and that who is the individuals who we will be focusing on this evening, because what we're trying to do, of course, is get this piece of legislation, AMRA, introduced, are we not, into the House and Senate. So the focus, therefore, I mean, there's sort of secondary and tertiary focuses on local elected officials, state, county, and the like, but our real prize, so to speak, are our federal officials. So this commentary is based on trying to set up, schedule, forming a group, organizing for the meeting, any optional activities, which probably are not relevant right now anyway, at the beginning, going over the meeting agenda, having the meeting, going over that agenda during the meeting, and then what happens afterwards. Okay, next. So when we're talking about reaching out and lobbying, what do we mean by that? Well, I say lobbying in parentheses because technically what we're trying to do is educate. People who we're going to come into contact with are probably not nearly on the other side of the learning curve as we are related to monetary issues. So it's really important that we approach them with a goal of educating them. Secondary goal, and these are interrelated, to build relationships. And thirdly, to encourage them to take appropriate actions, which is for them to either be the sponsor of AMRA or a co-sponsor. And what lobbying is a lawful attempt to influence the actions, policies, or decisions of government officials, most often, in our case, legislators, those who are supposed to be representing us, we the people, or members of regulatory agencies, but in our case, is legislators. Of course, there are a couple ways that lobbying has been done historically in this country. That top view there is some illegal ways in which you have sort of pay to play, the influencer, representing either themselves, very super duper wealthy individuals, or representing corporate entities, just simply bribe them by doling out cash to public. And that's not really considered to be quite as legal as, well, it's never been legal, but people got away with it for a very long time. Now we do it legally, where you have a middle person, a lobbyist, who oftentimes, this is sort of top-down form of lobbying, are hired by an organization. And if it's a very well-to-do organization, of which AMRA or AFJM is not, the special interest gives the money to the lobbyist, who in turn gives the money to the politicians. So it's a legal form of lobbying, but some people call it legalized bribery. Well, we're not about either one of those, right? We're on the below part of this visual, which is we don't have money power, and power is really defined ultimately, bottom line, by organized money or organized people. Well, we don't have a whole lot of the former. Sure as heck need to focus on the latter, of trying to organize people to just go into our legislative buildings and meet with our elected officials, or do it virtually, depending on the time, place, and the circumstances. So we're people power. All right, so the first step really is scheduling the meeting. How to do it? Well, if the goal is, and I think a good start is to try to set up a meeting with your legislator, even though they are in Washington during the year, they're at home an awful lot, usually from Thursday afternoon to Monday afternoon, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the congressional calendar. But at least try to meet with that person, your legislator, your congressperson, or your senator. Senators come back less frequently than your representatives. So maybe your reps, House of Representatives would be a good place to start. And so an initial place to do that is to call the local office. And the local office has a scheduler. National office in DC, they have their own scheduler. So you want to call the scheduler and try to set up a meeting. The scheduler will probably say, well, you know, I don't know everything, put it in writing, send it to me in email. So send them an email. And when you're on the phone or in the email, ask for a meeting with your representative. That's the goal, to try to meet with him, her, or them. Be prepared to discuss during the call monetary reform in general, important to meet. So you're trying to pitch that scheduler right off the bat, because they may not know what you're talking about. Be flexible with the date and time. Their schedule is, you know, probably more time consistent and filled than yours. The goal, and realistically, you're not going to get a meeting more than anyway committed. They'll say 30 minutes. If they really like what you're talking about, they'll give you an extra 10 or 15. But off the bat, be prepared to have a meeting for no more than 30 minutes. Ask when you'll have an answer. Again, this can be over the phone or by email. After you send the email, you may have to give them a call. And if no answer by that date, call. Ask for a response, or when you'll have a response. When you talk to them, they'll probably say, we'll get back to you by a certain date. If you don't get a response by that date, call again. So it's just cat and mouse. Just, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. These people are getting 5,000 requests every week. You just have to make sure you respectfully be insistent and persistent. The bottom line, and realistically, really is you're probably not going to meet with your congressional representative. There's some advantages and disadvantages about that. More realistic, if it's local, is to meet with the local head of the office, who may or may not know this issue. Sometimes they're really good, they're really sound people. Other times they're just sort of administrators and they don't necessarily keep up with a lot of issues. So if that's the case, you may want to switch and try to organize a meeting in DC virtually. And if you could just go back real quick, the goal there, if you try to have a meeting virtually in DC, the goal is to either meet with the overall legislative director, or maybe even better, the aide that deals with issues around banking and finance, because that person is going to have at least some knowledge of the issue area, we hope. And sometimes you're lucky and you get the whole legislative director person may have a better handle holistically on all of these issues, including legislative. They are usually at top of the sort of the intellectual food chain when it comes to knowing issues. So anyway, that's the idea about setting up a meeting. Try to set it up locally. Realistically, you may not. You may get the local person, and if that's good enough, fine, do it. But if you feel like you really want to meet with somebody right from the get-go who knows about these issues, then you may want to set your goal on trying to meet with, by virtually, the legislative aide dealing with financial matter, or the legislative director. Next slide. All right, forming a group. Basically, it's who to bring and who not to bring. The people you want to bring are as many, up to 6 people, if you can, including yourself and including someone, preferably from national AFJM representative, because they're going to have, credibility representing the national organization. So it's good to have somebody from national on the call. But the rest should be, if possible, constituents, people who live in the congressional district, who may know the representative may know you and the other people, or some of them. The constituents may have worked on the campaign, at least know what the representative has done on other issues so that they can say something positively about that they do that does not deal with monetary reform. So trying to have as many as possible is really important. Outside, the other sort of group to have are either individuals or organizational representatives who have some kind of positive relationship, and meaning that they've generally supported the representative, sort of are known in the news or in social media as supportive, and or who have power, meaning they have either money or people, potential voters or workers, volunteers, to bring to the table who can potentially help the representative. So those are the type of individuals and organizational representatives that you want at the meeting. By contrast, the people you don't want to bring with you are people who are in the past or in the present are running against the representative. They will consider that person as a potential threat. A person or persons who have poor relationship with the representative, who's the curmudgeon who gives that person a hard time, has shown up to town halls and asks too tough questions or insulting, those type of people. And outside groups and representatives from organizations, in turn, also who have poor relationships with representatives. You don't want those people either. All right, so organizing the meeting, there's really 2 parts here. The first is putting together the kind of materials you want to either bring with you or in part share beforehand with the representative or the aide. And they include information about AFJM. Representative may not know much about the Alliance for Just Money. AMRA, both the full version, and even if that full version is electronic, that's sent beforehand, that's fine. You don't necessarily need to print that out, but the summary as well, that can be printed out and or sent electronically beforehand with the representative or the aide. I don't know if we have talking points on this. Maybe the summary serves as that, and that's fine. That's why the question mark. The NEED Act. Now, we're not talking about the NEED Act as something that's going to be introduced. That's AMRA. But why the NEED Act may be important to bring along with you or to, again, send electronically is this is an actual bill that was introduced previously in the US House of Representatives. So it's got more than some street cred. It's got some congressional cred. It had a sponsor, it had a co-sponsor, and so that's really important. So that's all that to say is that what we're trying to do now is not brand new. Congress people never do anything that's brand new, never like to really stick their necks out. They don't have to. This has already been introduced. Make difference, make sure they know about it, even if they don't read it, even though they don't pick it up. The fact that it's there and they can see it's multiple pages, it's been vetted, it's been introduced, voila, use it. It has some credibility. Any list of supportive organizations or resolutions. Now, I know that AMRA doesn't necessarily have that. The American Monetary Act and the NEED Act did. Those might be things that the Alliance for Just Money may want to pull from the American Monetary Institute, those sorts of documents that spoke to the need for monetary reform. Any list of individuals who support or have supported monetary reform. You know, names like Kumoff and some of the people who've spoken on Coffeehouse, just put them on a sheet of paper. Hey, here are people who have spoken during our events, you know, and their credibility and, you know, their positions, their organizations, their whatever they, you know, if they've written a book. These are people who generally support real monetary reform, even though they may not have necessarily signed on exactly and precisely to AMRA. That's okay. Maybe, and I have a question mark if it serves the purpose or not, to bring with you any information about what is going on in an advanced way about monetary reform in other countries, and anything else that you think would legitimize the issue. But be judicious, because the more information you throw on people, the less likely they're to they will review any of it. And again, just to underscore, you know, one or more of these resources you may want to have in the hands of the aide or the representative beforehand. In fact, more than may, you do, so that they aren't coming into this meeting cold. Next slide. All right, second is to sort of have a prep meeting, just like you prepare for all sorts of things in practice and make sure people know what they're going to do. Same with this. So those constituents, for example, that are going to be part of the call, and the representative, hopefully from the AFJM, try to have a meeting in person or a combined meeting and or call, virtual Zoom call, and people introduce themselves, get to know one another, review the materials, and, you know, sort of think about what sort of questions that the aide or representative may ask and be prepared to answer them. Decide what roles, who's going to facilitate. Maybe it should be the person who set up the call. The aide already, scheduler already knows who that person is. There's already some familiarity. Have a note taker, somebody who's keeping track of what is said, what questions are raised from either your side or their side. Who's going to present the summary of AMRA? That person should be designated, maybe the representative from AFJM. The presenter of support, if there's, again, any supportive statements, resolutions, individuals, who's going to be presenting that list? And sort of the person who's going to, as we say affectionately, who's going to put the bite on the representative, meaning who's going to ask, will they introduce or co-sponsor AMRA? All right, and then next, we want to make sure that there's a commitment of issues and personal stories to share by each person. So the constituents basically are going to, you know, think through and talk about, just in general, without necessarily going over what they're going to say, just, you know, why monetary reform, why passing AMRA is important to them, to tell their story in 2 to 3 minutes, and to make it as personal and as relevant and as local as possible. And so they can give some thought to that, so that when the meeting is held, they're ready to go, and they're ready, each person one at a time, to tell their story. Ask someone, another role here is to ask someone to research, go on their representative's website and see what their priorities are. You know, check out their press spot. That's usually a good place, where their press releases. That's where they, you know, tout their own horn about issues that are important to them. How much money is coming to the district for this program, that program. You know, all these people are there because they have a couple of issues that are near and dear to their heart. So finding 1 or 2 of them is important to do that research about, to give to the facilitator of the call, so that at the very beginning of the meeting, they can say, well, thank you, aide, or thank you, representative, for being on the call just before we start. I want to, for, you know, introducing this bill, or for securing X number of dollars to come into the district for X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, you're stroking them right from the start, off to a good start. You want to go over the agenda for the call, and if virtual or using Zoom, make sure everybody knows how to do that. Okay, and just before we go on, I don't know, a lot of people have Zoom, but they have the free version, which only goes up to 45 minutes. That may be fine. Sometimes when we meet, they'll set up the call too, but I don't know if, as a possibility, the AFJM line might be available. Groups, to meet with local representatives. So that's something maybe to talk about. All right, prior to the meeting, an optional action. I'm not suggesting this can happen, or any of these can happen. This oftentimes takes place after you've initially had a meeting and are back because they've sat on their hands or, are just dealing with 1,000 other things. You're trying to respectfully nudge them. So one thing to do would be, prior to the follow-up, sometimes even during the first meeting, is have people call into the office and say, hey, representative, I hope you'll with these people today. Thank you for meeting them. Please consider introducing or co-sponsoring AMRA. Sending a letter to the editor at any time, whether it's before they meet or afterwards, about the issue. And being the last thing is maybe the most contentious, but if done right, can be very supportive. I suggest this be done the very first time. Having supportive picketing or vigiling. We oftentimes get this connotation of, oh, if you're vigiling or picketing, you're against. But hey, representative is really good on these issues. We hope he or she or they really get behind supporting AMRA because it's consistent with, this issue, that issue, and this other issue that he, she, or they already support. So it's entirely consistent with, and we're going to go in and meet with the representative momentarily. Okay, next. All right, the meeting itself, again, keep in mind, you've got 30 minutes. They may give you more, but just think in terms of that. So you got to be really concise, on the mark, say what needs to be said, but quickly. Introductions, just more person said who they are, where they live in the district. Hopefully it's, a balanced contingent of constituents from different cities, or they represent different organizations, or they're just different in terms of constituencies made up of genders, races, backgrounds, interests, and the like. Thank them for the vote on issue that I previously mentioned. State the goal. Again, you're having somebody say, we're asking you, representative, to introduce the American Monetary Reform Act. Have whoever it is give a brief AMRA presentation. During the course of the presentation, remind them of whatever resources were sent, share any support that has been collected, and reference the NEAT Act. Again, I think it's important to have that. Again, then followed by sharing of stories from each person, basically why I support monetary reform, and then go into it for no more than 3 minutes. And then either the same person or a different person, again, repeat the ask. We're asking you again, representative, to introduce the American Monetary Reform Act. And then you open it up. I mean, first you wait before you open it up for questions. The ball now has been placed in their court. What are they going to say? The rep, there's no way on planet Earth that they're going to give you a definitive answer because it's not their place. They are not their boss. So all they can say, very much, you've convinced me. Hey, this is really information. It's great information. It's a lot of information. We need to look at it. We'll get back to you. So if it's the representative, he, she, or they are not going to say on the spot, well, maybe they will. If they're already somewhat familiar with the issue, and there's at least one person we can get into that I would say might be a candidate, how's that for a tease, that could be somebody who might be pretty serious pretty early on, but maybe not. I think in every case, they're going to say, hey, I've got to look at it. But just from what I've learned and what you said and what I already know, this looks like something that I would be interested in. But, what questions do they have, get into discussion and review then before you end the call. Any commitments you've made, or maybe when they ask a question, you didn't know the answer to, and it's entirely appropriate to say, Representative such and such, legislative director, I don't know. I'll get back to you. That's fine. That's fine. Perfectly fine. And let them know you'll follow up. And then thank them again. Okay, next slide. following up, again, send a email with any follow-up information that they requested. And it's a nice touch these days, because who gets letters anymore, right? Remember those days where, oh, I email. Now it's like, oh, I got a personal note. That's pretty, so send them a note thanking them. I think that goes a long way. Send emails to constituents on if this is an opportunity anyway. If we know there are other constituents on our database who live in that congressional district, encourage them to call, for pretty regularly and ask them to, have you made up your mind? Are you going to support introducing or co-sponsoring the American Monetary Reform Act? Since it's not been introduced yet, I think the initial ask is to introduce, unless somebody already agreed to introduce, then you flip and say, will you co-sponsor? But I think just right off the bat, the default is to co-sponsor. And same with each meeting participant via email and our social media. Anybody who's been on that initial call should be smiling and dialing every week, sending an email every week, asking that whoever it is you met with has represented, as your boss had made up his or their mind yet. And in 2 weeks, send an email and or call the office, ask for a response, be persistent. Whoever, again, was sort of the initial person to set up the meeting and was the facilitator during the meeting should be maybe the point person who reaches out formally. Everybody else can send emails to the office in general or call the office in general, but to make personal communication with the person you met with, if it's an aide, it probably is best if it's the person who was sort of the facilitator of the call. And never underestimate the power of persistence. Insistence and persistence, since these people are really getting it all the time. All right, lastly. Who was it? I think it was Lucille who mentioned that, my gosh, there's just a lot of chaos and days, and that is darn true, is it not? And I use this as a metaphor of pounding steel. How successful are you if anybody tries to pound steel when it's cold? Not all that successful. It's only when steel becomes unstable, when it's heated up, when things become hot and unstable and all those nuclides move around and all, then you have an opportunity to mold and shape the steel in accordance to your goals. Well, right now, my friends, we have a society, a government, an economy, a culture, an ecology that is about as can be. So it is prime opportunity for us to take hammer in hand and non-violently, but with the goal of shaping that steel, shaping the body politic in the ways we think is important, in a significant way, an important way, and an urgent way, and never before should we have and wait is to pass and introduce and pass AMRA. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. That was really, really insightful. And Greg, of course, has a lot of lobbying experience, so we'll be sure to keep him in our circle as we move this outreach efforts forward. So now we have a bit of audience participation for you all. So as you've been listening to Lucille's discussion about what the AMRA is, and from Greg, how you can actually get support from your representatives, we'd like you to think about who do you think would be the best representative to sponsor the American Monetary Reform Act. So please participate in the chat. Let us know if you think it's somebody in your district or somebody who's in the news a lot. So just let us know in the chat. And also, just to make sure that we're all really hammering away at this topic, we want to ask you, what candidates and legislators will you be reaching out to about monetary reform and the specific AMRA Act this fall, or maybe until January? And as we go through this presentation, just kind of think, what else, as far as support, do you think that you will need from this Legislative Action Committee to help you actually take that step and reach out to your legislators? So go ahead and pop your answers into the chat about who you think would be a good catalyzer person for AMRA. And we will now be passing the torch to Mark Pash, who will tell us about how they've conducted past, current efforts to reach out on monetary reform. So let's hear from Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi. Got everything there?
Yeah, can you go ahead and tell us what you've been?
There we are. Okay.
Mhm.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to this. This is the very important thing that we have to do here, is to reach out to the federal legislatures and their candidates. What I'm going to talk about first, which is probably the longest, is what I've done in the past. And I love question and answers, so write them down and we can discuss things at the end. Going back into the late 80s, I couldn't figure out why I had some advisory work in Japan, and I couldn't figure out why this mighty economy collapsed, because I know they outwork everybody in the world, and they collapse. And I says, how could that possibly be? So I started researching. And the first book I read, which I really enjoyed, was Secrets of the Temple by William Grader, which is an excellent. The problem with this reading for legislatures is that it's 900 pages. So is Stephen's book. And so we've been concentrating on doing a lot shorter versions. And then also I gave them the longer versions. So if they want to put it by their bedside, and we'll go through this. So naively, I wrote up a couple pages, and in 1992, I went to an event with my congressman. This was my start. It's a little naive. And of course, he was a very nice fellow. And I happened to run into him before COVID on a cruise ship. He was already retired, and he still wasn't interested in anything. Anyway, so he didn't even know what I was talking about. He didn't even know there was a monetary reform about money. He was a lawyer, of course. And so that was my first contact. This is going to be abbreviated history. Whatever I've said here, I've done 10 times more. So then I couldn't figure it out. And of course, I was running a practice. So this was a hobby at the time. So I decided to take it to people and run for Congress. And in 1996, I ran for Congress. And in all the debates and in all the talks that I gave running for Congress in the primaries, nobody understood what I was talking about. They had no concept, zero. So after 96, I joined the Democratic Club, and then I helped develop and start a Democratic Club. And I gave lectures to the clubs and service clubs and colleges. And there you meet your politicians. So if you want to get really active, join one of your political party clubs. I'm not sure about the Republicans. We'll talk about that a little later. But the Democratic Club would they'll eventually get to you. And even the Democratic Party has events. And you can meet, I've met everybody. I've got a picture with me of our governor and Hillary and all that. You eventually get around to it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about what I'm doing currently. So I became more active in politics. Still nobody understood what I was talking about. This is way before AMI. So in 1999, I wrote my first book. It was really talked about changing the system, distribution of the system. I'm still doing my talks in Democratic clubs and meeting congressmen and meeting all sorts of people, because I belong to other things, and you run into these people. Not much. I tried to convince the guy that won our primary is currently and has been serving since 96. His serves on the financial committee, believe it or not. And he's the big guy that wants to eliminate Bitcoin. He's really anti-Bitcoin. A lot of that education came from me, but to take on the monetary system, they they contribute about over $1 billion every year to lobbying and actual direct contributions to all these legislators. So it's hard to make some headway. And so even so, I lobbied him, and Stephen lobbied him. He got our books a couple times, and I've also donated to his campaign. I was even at his wedding, but he doesn't seem, and he had lunch about it. He doesn't seem to follow up on it. And so, understanding monetary reform really, I believe, takes a little reading. Either people that I've converted, they've had to read. You just don't pick it up in a half hour, an hour. And that's the way I've proceeded. And then I got the idea to open up my own nonprofit with my own website to promote monetary reform. I did it a little differently in my next book, a little differently. What I did was, because I've had some other philosophies in macroeconomics, and I put a book together in 2014, and I've tried to introduce monetary reform within the overall macroeconomic changes. And they're really, except for monetary reform, they're really just improvements on our current system, because everything's there except monetary reform. And that's what's holding us back. It's the most important factor in a modern industrial society. It by far, it's just the number one thing that has to be changed before we're going to get anything done in climate change or anything. So then in 08, about 08, 07, I don't know if you get to my age, and it kind of blends together. I finally, Stephen came out with this book, and I read it because I was reading everything on monetary reform at that time, or money. And I started to go AMI, and I says, well, I don't want to be out here alone in Los Angeles. So I joined forces with him, mostly marketing his stuff and giving his book out, and not mine. And I gave a lot of his books out to congressmen. I've had dinners with them, just me and him and another guy that really knowledgeable about it. For we couldn't convince him to proceed. And that was in 09. And that congressman, I just moved into her district, and both of the congressmen were not in my district. She just moved into my district and recontacted me. And why did they recontact you? Because I'm a donor, money. That's what they're always interested in. They work full time on the money, so they don't have time to read anyway. So you have to kind of make it short. So, and so I said, well, let me meet with your campaign manager, played it really low key. And I said, you could pick up some Republican votes with my stuff, which I've developed some things on, which we'll talk about. And she still hasn't, she still didn't respond. So after I joined forces, I wrote my other book, new book, in 2014. It came out in 2016. Here's a copy of it if you see it here. And if anybody wants a free copy, I think most of you have it already. I don't know who's attending, but I know a lot of you do. Just email me your address, and I'll have my office mail you a copy. Same thing with the book that Virginia and I wrote, which we'll talk about. So that brings us up to date. I wrote up my second book, and I've created a package for congressional people. And so I'll talk a little bit about what I do. And that's the next section, which is the current, or the present. And basically, because I'm a donor, okay, I have a little advantage. They call me, or they'll send an email that they would like to talk to me. And I respond to those. I usually, I'll respond to Republicans, but I only get it mostly from Democrats. And because of COVID, it's kind of shut down. I couldn't go out for a lot of health reasons, and that kind of hindered all my exploration, but it's kind of increasing now again. And so I've had quite a few calls. The last one was from a really intelligent guy, who had actually one of the few that really knew where money came from. smart guy, was the Obama administration running in Florida. And what I do in the current package, and I'll tell you what's in the package, I figured it's 2 to 3 hours of reading if they're a good reader. And I said, I'll give you $500 if you read it. And I'll give you more if you want to talk about it and have your campaign manager. So I know many people can't do that, but it really gets their attention, at least to open them up to the monetary reform movement. I've even gone, so in this package that I give them, I send my book. That's the second book they mentioned with Virginia. If you want a copy of this too, if you don't have it. Okay. How We Pay for a Better World. I want to even sure that's only monetary form. My book is macroeconomics. And if you want a copy too, I'll send you a free copy. Just send me your address. So in that, so those are the 2 books in it. I have 2 articles from The Economist magazine on the Democratic Party being, I don't want to say confused or lost, but confused, I guess, is the best word. They're smarter now than they used to be, because we've all been out there talking. But so I have 2 articles that pertain to that topic that I use, that I put in it. I always use the AMI brochure. Sometimes I mail that by myself. I used to give them Stephen's books, a lot to the congressman. And this is to candidates too, not just the ones that are elected. Okay. Especially in districts. I'll contact some districts that are borderline. I have a couple other written articles that I can put in there depending on the topic we discussed. One of them, a couple of them are already up on the website. One on inflation that I wrote with Virginia, one on climate change and the environment, and why Hillary lost, because it's still the economic, it's the economy stupid. Okay, so that's where I started, and that's I get some response, not too much. Some of the candidates, I've mailed it out. I've got one candidate in Michigan to actually put it on the monetary reform on his website, but he didn't do his tactics. So I have some tactics, actually campaign tactics, that I've created to win in a borderline district. Nobody's taken me up on it. I guess they'd rather lose. That's what happens. And so this guy in Michigan just listed monetary reform on his website. Well, big deal. And what happens is Democrats in these districts campaign only to Democrats. They never campaign to Republicans or independents, which is, of course, the fastest growing party. And I think it's the largest party now is independents, if you want to call it a party. So I send this package out, and I get some response from it. I had one candidate then eventually drop it, and one candidate who should have done it, he might lose otherwise. One candidate was running against Kevin McCarthy, who's the next Speaker of the House if the Republicans take over. And she doesn't have a chance in hell in that district. So I don't know why she didn't want to, further talk. What happens, I think the campaign managers don't want to leave the box. And though they think they're going to, because they get paid either way, whether you lose or win. We'll talk about that a little bit if you want. And so, and she didn't take me up on it. And I try to do it in advance, way in advance. So, coming up to it's too late to do anything now. I like to keep things simple. The KISS sales, keep it simple, stupid. Our goal is to start the debate in Congress. One of the major themes I do with politicians too, if you notice, actually it's more prevalent in South America, but it's pretty prevalent here too, You notice in elections where they go left and right and left and right. One time they'll do a left person and they'll do a right person because they vote on the economy and they're not in charge of the economy. Money is. Okay. They can help rescue with deficit spending and what they did like in COVID and stuff like that. But basically, money's in charge of the economy, and you see what happens when you take away the money, as we saw in 08 and 91 and 81, and every time that they raise interest rates, and you're going to see it now. If they keep interest rates too high for too long, we'll go into another recession, which sometimes is a good political time to contact your person. So what am I going to do in the future? Okay, with this package and other things. Well, we just sent out an 8-page, I think it was 8 pages, a direct mail fundraiser, subscribe, come out, and we sent out 2,000 of them. And so you'll have access to that online if you want to use it. I think I'm going to include that in the package. And now my next concentration is going to be recruiting campaign managers with my tactics and in order to get some of the campaigns, because deep down they'll land customers if they wanted they'll candidates, clients with tactics. So they might be interested in discussing this. I come in from the macro basis and use monetary reform as the #1 issue, but there's others too, which you can talk about later. And I think that's a big area. Also a big area which I didn't do, which we should do in the future, is recruit journalists to our subscriber list. They're very influential. They have no idea about money or the money systems, and they write about it. And we need to do that. So besides the NGOs, the journalists, and I'm going to go start working on the campaign managers. I had one person give me a cold call. I knew it was for money. It was the campaign managers, because these campaign managers have services to raise money. They cold call and do those emails and all sorts of things. I get 100 emails a day. It's very annoying. Anyway, so I said, okay, I'll contribute, but I want to spend 1 hour with you. I'm going to be in New York at the end of the month. I'd like to spend an hour with one of the senior partners and the campaign manager. Didn't have to be the owner. And they knew I was going to make a contribution. It's probably he's a guy running against Senator Rand in Kentucky, which is he's probably a long shot. And never got back to me. All I asked for her was an hour on Friday morning when I'm in New York at the end of the month. And she's never got back to me. And she knew that I was going to make a contribution to this guy. Okay. And he was supposed to set up a phone call and, whatever. So you get that type of stuff. And that's why you have to be important in recruiting the staff too. The staff and the AMI, one of the AMI meetings, Congressman Ted Lieu, I had one of his staffers attend the entire meeting or most of it. And she understood what was going on. It didn't help. For some reason, he didn't follow up. And he worked for a bank, and I explained to him the bank because I went to dinner with him. So, and then my next campaign after campaign managers, I've done a little bit, but not a lot. And that is to Republicans. What I would call the non, I guess that new term for it is mega Republican, the non-mega Republican. The conservatives, the mega ones have just lost all ability to reason. They're just not logical. They need to go to Vulcan in order to take their school in logic. Okay, so
sounds like you've had quite an adventure with this outreach effort, Mark. So thank you so much for sharing.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe maybe some of the legislators that you have reached out to in the past, we can retarget them again as we organize the Legislative Action Committee. So thank you. And we'll now move on to how you can get started and what every volunteers' role in this outreach effort is going to be. So Lucille had actually prepared a sample of letters that you can potentially send to your legislators or candidates, and you can also update them and make them more personalized and encourage them to read the whole AMRA, and then you can ask for the meeting and do all of those steps that we've mentioned tonight. Lucille, did you want to say a couple of words about this document? We will also, of course, be emailing it out to everybody who registered to this coffee house.
Yeah, so it will have a number of sample letters that have been written by LAC committee members, and many of us have sent a version of this letter or our own letters, and it will be directed. There's some guidance for you, and you can mix and match, choose from them. Some are real short and clear and could be sent to anybody. Others are, more targeted to your representative, or even more specifically, representatives, say, from your state who are serving on the Finance Committee in the House, or on the Senate banking. I have to find the full title. I have it here. Anyhow, it's facing it because it's not in front of me. But the two committees in each chamber that would likely receive AMRA once it's introduced. And so I think these letters will be a helpful tool. The file is almost ready to go, and we will put it, share the link with you on a Google Doc, and that enables us to be able to update it. Currently, AMRA is a link on our archive page, but we are in the process of working on a full AMRA webpage for our website. So that will be a little more accessible and findable to people as soon as they get to our website. And the letter will also, or the file will also have follow-up phone call script on it for the kind of calls that Greg mentioned. Now, we definitely encourage you to go to candidate forums. They're happening right now. I have one in my state district right now. She came to my door recently. We talked about this. She gets it. I gave her a copy of Virginia and Mark's book. The League of Women Voters is sponsoring that debate. So go and ask a question. Ask what they know about our money system and what they think should happen about it, and whether they're familiar with the NEED Act, and tell them about AMRA, and do the same. So there will be also one sample letter that is geared towards state and local, both county and municipal representatives, legislators. And, even though monetary reform is at the federal level, it has incredible amount of consequences, positive, for state and local government, and their support and advocacy for it will be crucial. And so doing the work on our local levels is very important, and getting other organizations to do it. And the Youth Caucus has really helped us at our last coffee house. We've already endorsed the Stop the Money Pipeline campaign. And so working with other organizations and the League of Women Voters work is very, very important. That we had a coffee houses on last January and February, and John Howell and Marie Werner presented on at our coffee house. So we're collecting tools and resources, and need to get the commitments from people here, and follow-ups with you all about what candidates you've talked to and what the responses were, which legislators you reached out to, and also doing, we can move on, but doing the local work in getting people in your community to sign our petition, to subscribe to AFJM, gives us that database of more and more people in your locality when you want to go meet with your representative or senator. That's it. Thanks, Tabitha.
Thanks, Lucille. So those are some of the steps you can take, as we mentioned. And of course, you can also join the Legislative Action Committee. And we have our chairperson here today who will also give some brief words. Is Tom here?
I'm here.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for everybody for doing this, especially Fernanda, who really organized things so well. I just want to reiterate that we've got a few important goals that we'd like to accomplish this year. One, you've heard all these already. One is to get other groups to endorse us, professional groups, unions, chambers of commerce, if we can. So to do that, we have to do a little bit of education. We have to reach out. Professional organizations like Union of Concerned Scientists, Physicians for Social Responsibility. We have an example of doing this that Steve Walsh did with the Chicago Teachers Union, that endorsed AMI and endorsed the monetary reform of AMI. So that's one of the big goals. Another big goal is to begin to educate and inform smaller governmental bodies, counties, villages, and so forth. So if you know a village that, a small village that would be willing to put this, to endorse us, to listen to us, and be willing to support us, please let us know. So we need all your help with this in terms of letting us know what you think might be possible and where you think we might get in with education and get an endorsement. Another goal is to actually contact legislators and candidates. And as Greg said, we're looking for legislators that would be possibly willing to sponsor, be willing, open to listen to it and sponsor, and then, or possibly co-sponsor. If you know any that you feel would be particularly open to our message, let us know. We've already contacted 3 or 4, and we've had some meetings with, a few meetings with staff, but we haven't really gotten very far. In fact, I could, when I was listening to Mark, you know, I was hearing some of our own experiences of people not getting back to us, and we becoming sort of thorns in their sides, and they still not getting back to us on things. So any kind of help you can give us in that manner would be greatly appreciated. Ideas of people to contact. And finally, you know, we're always looking for extra help. If you'd like to join the LAC, we meet on Tuesdays at every other Tuesday, 2 times a week, 2 times a month. We meet at 2 o'clock Eastern time, 1 Central, 12 Mountain, and 11 Pacific. If you're interested and find that time difficult, we are willing to see what we could arrange that might be more convenient. So we are looking for extra help. And finally, I just want to thank everyone who's participated today. I hope you have some questions, because I know Mark and Greg do like to entertain questions. Fernanda, great job. Mark, wonderful job. Greg, excellent. Lucio, as always, excellent. And thank the entire LAC for their work. We have to acknowledge John Howell, who did so much work in redacting, reworking the NEED Act into AMRA, and it's not done yet. We know that there'll probably be more changes, and it's an ongoing, living, breathing document. So always open to more suggestions on that. But John is pretty exhausted with all the work he's done on it. He deserves to be able to stand back and take a breath. But anyway, thank him for that. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tom. So just to reiterate some of Tom's points, please join this committee. It's really important to diversify the people that we get in front of congresspeople. If they see us and what we want, they will begin to listen. And some last points to mention is, of course, we have a petition page, so please share it on your networks. We can gather signatures, and then when people do go meet with the representatives, they can send a big pile of locally signed petitions that people would like to have a monetary reform, and that will further pressure the congressman. Additionally, we will also, with the Youth Caucus, be planning some info sessions to just, again, diversify our just money movement. And another way you can participate, as mentioned, you can write op-eds or letters. You can, if you have any questions about how to get started putting your voice out there into the media, please ask us. We're happy to help. And as well, you may want to look into the remember the 5th of November Occupy the Fed event. That's going to be happening as well. You can find it on Facebook. And please keep an eye on your inbox for this Google Doc about how to write to your representatives. Please join the committees, subscribe, invite your friends and family and everybody to subscribe to our movement. So we will now be taking questions. So I will be ending the stop share, and you guys can raise your hands as questions come up. I'll let you on screen. Thank you, everybody. As I wait for questions, I'll read through the chat because some of you did put in which representatives you think would be good supporters for this AMRA bill. I'm hearing Matthew O could be a potential. He's a candidate where? Mike Holden put that in through the chat. We've also, of course, heard about Rashida Tlaib. Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, of course, could be very good senators to lead sponsor this. Yeah, we'll take a question from Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Can you see my video?
Yep.
Very well done, everybody. Thank you so much for putting this together. I appreciate it. So I'm willing to go to my representatives and coordinate these activities in my district. I am also relatively near to Minnesota, and so I could go into Minnesota as well and maybe find somebody from Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have, of course, Ilhan Omar. She's not my representative, but she may be somebody else that could be considered for sponsoring. Matthew Ho, of course, is Green Party rep, and there have been a lot of shenanigans in that election trying to get him off the ballot. Hang on. So I think that's another opportunity that, of course, we should reach out to Matthew Ho about this activity. I think it's important that he understands what's going on. A few questions from my side here. So, well, maybe one question and one comment. The comment has to do with the term fractional reserve banking. I think that there is enough evidence to support the claim that fractional reserve banking doesn't exist. But reserve banking certainly does. And, you know, MMT people, the first criticism typically that we hear is, oh, it says fractional reserve banking, you guys don't know what you're talking about. So yes, there is a debate about that. And I think it's conclusive that the term fractional is objectionable. But anyway, I know it says by any other means, and some people won't listen to that, I guess, or it doesn't matter. So anyways, that's my opinion. My comment is that perhaps we should consider revising that language. The question that I have is about interest rates. There really isn't much or anything in the NEAT Act or AMRA about interest rate setting. And that's one of the primary functions of the Fed. And I think that that is a substantial enough of an issue to warrant some additional exposition. And I am of the opinion that the government shouldn't be setting interest rates or targeting interest rates as a way of controlling the economy. We should let the private sector compete over interest rates. And of course, under the NEAT Act, there would be no need for the government to create debt in order to finance itself. So it would only create money for that purpose. I do think that there is a public purpose with the government issuing bonds, but not for government financing. So question is regarding interest rates under the NEAT Act or AMRA, if that's something that should be considered in more detail.
Thanks, Mike. That is a great question. I am probably not equipped to answer that, so I will pass it to Lucille or Greg or more experts. But I do know that the Legislative Action Committee is further discussing the intricacies of the AMRA, and it might still be evolving even while we push for AMRA through Congress, because we still need to raise awareness on monetary reform in general, and then the specificities can go on. So if anybody has a good answer for Mike, just raise your hand. Also, or John Howell, yeah.
Is John here? Does John wanna? There is a small area in the AMRA that limits interest rates. We had a discussion about how high that should be, and actually a lot of folks think it's too high as it is. I think we set it at 8%. I'd have to go back and look.
Yes.
That interest rates can't exceed 8%. But that's a definite important point that we should need to discuss further. As you know, if the government's creating the money, they're creating it without debt. And so the government itself doesn't need reserves, but in AMRA, the reserves will come from money that's, John can explain it a little bit better than I. It's paid back from loans, so that there is a reserve. There is a reserve of money for emergency. So it's just sitting there. There's no interest on that. So I think what you seem to be referring to is private interest rates that banks can charge, and that's sort of back into the market, I think. Although I think we limited it at 8%.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's what I was referring to. The 8% limit, and thanks for bringing that up. I think that, you know, of course, setting a maximum interest rate is critically important. Otherwise, it's usury. What I'm talking about is the interest rate setting, you know, like the Federal Reserve, one of their functions is, you know, with the way that they control the economy is through the interest rate setting, right? And under the NEAT Act, we would bundle the Federal Reserve in the Treasury So then what would the Treasury be doing? Because right now, one of the primary things that the Fed does is they set the interest rates, right? And they do this with interest on reserves and other parameters. I mean, there's a lot of different tools that they have, but that's one of the primary activities of the Federal Reserve. And that activity simply wouldn't even need to exist, in my opinion. But I wanted to hear other people's thoughts about that.
Go ahead, Mark.
Mark's got his hand up. And,
Mhm.
and Joe.
Unmute yourself, Mark.
And then Joe might know, well, when you move the Fed into the Treasury Treasury bills and bonds aren't going to go away. If you did none of them, it'd be 30 years before they went away. So they'll still be setting interest rates. So we don't get, it's in the Constitution and they can make loans and borrow money. So we're not doing away with treasuries legally, so that the Treasury can still set the interest rates. And it's very important because it's the guidelines of a lot of institutions and the insurance institutions, pensions, the marketplace. So the treasuries will be the guideline, and then also what the other countries do is another guideline. So it's out there in the world. It's going to be a little rocky because treasuries are required in reserves in profit-making companies like insurance companies and even pensions. And so those are going to be, they're going to go up in value because they're not going to issue as many under monetary reform. But the Treasury bill interest rate, they could still set interest rates. And I think they would be the lead, at least for 30 years, to see what happens in the future. But it is an unknown thing.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll
Yeah, I
take
mean,
that question. Okay.
if
go
I
ahead.
could, yeah, do you mind if I jump in real quick? So you're absolutely right, Mark, that treasuries are critically important in today's economy. But the way that they are used is as a reference point for other interest rates in the economy, right? So when the Federal Reserve sets the interest rate targets on, for securities, for treasury securities, then that affects other interest rates in the market. So mortgage rates and things of this nature. So the interest rate setting activity would not have that as systemic of an effect on the rest of the interest rates in the economy. I guess that's kind of what I was getting at, because it isn't only about what the government.
I know what you were getting at. I tried to answer it, but if the Treasury sets interest rates on the 30, 60, 90-day bills, and the 5-year and the 10-year and the 30-year, you're going to have some guidelines. Like I said, it's an unknown area, but you're going to have some significant guidelines without the central bank setting their interest rates. So it'll be interesting.
All right.
Great. We'll hear from Joe now. And if you guys can keep, we will be discussing all of the intricacies of the AMRA, probably in the Legislative Action Committee, and as well if you guys are subscribed to the American Monetary Institute. I forgot to put the plug in that they are having their yearly conference, and that is October 7th to 9th. So if we can talk to our heart's delight about interest rates and there, we'll now take our question from Joe Polito.
Hi, I hope this works. I'm having technical problems here. Thanks for those great presentations to all of you. I would just like to add a little additional arrow in the quiver to Mark's heroic efforts. In the last 4 years, I've talked to 4 federal politicians in Canada about this. And one was very polite and listened, but just didn't understand what was going on, started talking about gold and stuff. It's a very smart person, but it's like dunking a basketball and some people can't. Another person shuffled me off. even though the meeting was arranged by someone else that was kind of important. The third person I volunteered for somewhat, and I got a much better response from that person. And the fourth person I volunteered for a lot and got way better response. So I would suggest another avenue might be volunteering for the politician that you want to talk to. I donated a little too, but I think Mark's got us all beat that way. Anyways, I think volunteering is another way of getting heard. And the one that I volunteered for a lot has listened numerous times. I started before the COVID crisis, and then it started making a lot more sense because of all the things the banks did during the COVID crisis. So that's something I'd advocate. Thanks very much.
Great point, Joe. Yeah, I also kind of wanted to emphasize that it's really not the only way at all to get a congressperson's attention. I've participated in probably 6 or 7 lobby meetings in my young lifetime already. So it's definitely possible to, just contact the schedule, set up that meeting, just like Greg was telling us, that method. And the one I was taught by Citizens Climate Lobby really works. Just get a diverse crowd in there with the office of the rep. Next question we have from Tabitha. Go ahead.
Hi, my question's mainly directed at Greg, but if anybody else has information on it, I'd love to hear it. I was curious, Greg, if you have any experience with scorecards and the legislators, creating a scorecard of whether that legislator supports monetary reform or whether they don't, and then being able to distribute that to voters and letting them know where these people stand and getting statements from them, if possible, on where they stand on the issue, and whether you think something like that would be effective for our organization.
Scorecards are certainly, yeah, good question. Scorecards are certainly a device that a lot of organizations use and have used them effectively as a means to inform the public whether they are a C4 or C3 organization. I know, League of Women Voters oftentimes is used sort of, rating candidates on issues and other organizations. But I'm not sure it would be appropriate in this case, simply because we're kind of focused, right, on one issue. And there isn't any legislation directly that has been yet introduced that they can be rated on for, against, whatever. So I think there would not be as much utility in doing that at this point in time anyway.
Awesome. I've definitely heard of that approach in other types of campaigns, but I think that makes sense that there isn't the president yet. I mean, it's not if we don't have the list of who supported the NEED Act way back when. So we'll see where that goes. Let's take the question from Lucille.
Yeah, so I have a question for everybody in the room who did not present, and that is there anyone who has participated in the kind of meeting that Greg laid out of scheduling and getting 3 to 6 people to meet with your congressperson or the legislative director or their point person on money and banking, or if not on that topic, on anything? Can you tell us the story of your experience going for a meeting with your legislator and what your lessons, your take-home lessons for us might be? John has his hand up, and then Alec. Maybe somebody else will join the answer. Thanks, John.
Well, I could just respond, yes, I participated in that kind of thing in Washington, but that was under the direction of the Friends Committee on National Legislation. That is to say, a well-organized and very experienced lobbying organization. And they have staff to do those kinds of things. So the staff is the FCNL are the people who organize those of us who come to Washington from all over the country to participate in the annual meeting of the FCNL. It's the Friends Committee on National Legislation. And so in the 2 days prior to the annual meeting, visits have been set up with congressmen. And those issues for that group are always issues having to do with war and peace or social justice issues. And there are a group of us who are working with in hopes to get the Friends Committee on Legislation itself aware of the need to address the issue of the monetary system. But as far as the techniques of making these lobby visits, Greg has outlined in perfect detail. That's exactly how it was done, just as Greg has outlined it.
Thanks, John. Let's hear Alex's story.
Yes, hello. I'm in Denver with the Rocky Mountain Public Banking Institute. We've been working at getting both a state legislation for a state bank or a city bank. The chair has been working for at least 11 years, I for about 7. We've met with several legislators, maybe up to 20. We've presented the material for why it is that public bank is so good. We've put together 2 bills, one for state and one for city. We've responded to every question that has been given back to us. And we have yet to have one person wanting to pick up the legislation, not one. So this year we decided that the way that we want to proceed is no longer, we will still continue with education, but in this case, see to it that we have with us organizations that speak and have connections with the legislators, saying that they are in favor of public banking because it serves their own constituents. So this is what we're attempting to do. But I must say, as you can tell from my accent, now I'm an American citizen, but I came over from Greece many years ago and taught in economics for 50 years in several universities, and I retired. But I must admit to not becoming cynical or despairing, but how shall I say, a very deep experience of the influence, but an emotional experience of the influence of money in both Republican and Democrats as to what it is that they will take up. That the idea, many people are talking now about our democracy and how it's challenged, etc. My own sense is that when we talk about our democracy, it's a democracy that is very average. It isn't really a strong democracy. The representation is a word that hasn't really been accurate to say that the people who are in government are actually representing us. And so the influence of money, both in terms of the idea that money is speech, and also the idea that corporations are individuals, speaks very much against democracy. So we've turned in the direction. I mean, we're not giving up for sure, and I haven't, but you know, to go in the direction of having institutions, labor unions, media, this, that, the other, to put to talk to the legislators, essentially saying or implying, listen, if you don't pick up this legislation, you won't be in Congress anymore. You know, so I'm sorry it took me so long to express where I am, but since you asked, I thought I'd give you my complete opinion.
That was a perfect answer, Alex. It definitely is a story of persistence. And I'm really glad you put in the splurge for Move to Amend, because we've got some folks also here representing Move to Amend. We've got Greg and Alfonso, and I don't know who else, but we already mentioned corporations, not people, money, not speech. So we've got one more question lined up, but perhaps I'll answer also to Lucille's question about how it's been.
Yeah, maybe I just one little thing only, and that's a question to Greg Coleridge, and that is, would you recommend prior to getting in touch with the representatives to find out who's funding that representative, so that we don't waste time with people that we, at least at the outset, know that they won't really budge very much? Thank you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it is important to do some homework beforehand. You can go to opensecrets.org or Federal Elections Commission. And in fact, you know, I had that one slide of who to bring and who not to bring. Sometimes if you go, you know, if you go to the Federal Elections Commission, anyone who's donated or invested more than $200 in any congressional campaign will be listed on there. If you just scroll through that list, maybe one of those people you know, and it's someone who maybe you can talk to and can be part of your group, your constituency that goes in and meets with that representative. But yeah, I mean, right off the bat, you don't have to go very far to find out and learn whether they are prospects or not, based on how deeply they are beholden to the moneyed interests.
Thank you.
Fernanda, your story.
Oh, sure. I've participated in a couple of lobby meetings, mostly with Citizens Climate Lobby, and that's asking specifically for their bill, which is a carbon fee and dividend. And the part that I like most about lobby meetings is when everybody goes around and shares their personal story. And with climate change, it's really simple because everybody these days is affected by climate change. But back when we started, there were some really more personal touches in there. So I like personal stories sharing with the representatives, because that really is what gets them to act from emotion. And that's where, if you've read much about behavior change literature, but like emotion and an emotional reaction is what gets people to take an action. So it's really important to have those personal stories. I'm also going to read a story from Nick Ignatz, who shared his own lobbying story in the chat, since their mic doesn't work. He says that he's met with both representatives and senators, their staff, and on occasion, themselves will meet with you. Monetary reform, they are looking for the opinion on the Federal Reserve on monetary reform. This makes it difficult since Congress is charged with directing the parameters of the Federal Reserve. Right now is a difficult time to expect them to make any kind of move supporting monetary reform, but it is a good time to meet with staff or the Congress member to begin the discussion. The upcoming election is all they can focus on now. Great point, Nick. I do agree with that. Now is really the time, but we're going to have to really compete for their attention. So let's hear from Young Kim.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful presentations. I'm a member of Solidarity for Monetary Democracy in Korea. Recently, I was very much impressed with the fact sheet of AMRA, and I translated it into Korean language and presented it to our members. Let me ask a question to Greg about when I read the ideas about the AMRA legislation idea. Is it final or it can be a chance to be modified? I think it's
during the when it actually introduced to the House or Senate, there's this chance to be modified. Am I right? Or it's final? It's taken or declined? Because I have a little different ideas. We need to, where does the money comes from? Everybody says it currently comes from the private banks. But we need to, I think we need to think about the relationship between sovereign debt or the national bond and sovereign money, national currency. These two ideas, the national bond and the national money, is very closely related. I define the national bond as future money, and currency is current money, is cash. We need to set a more detailed guideline for the national bond. National bond is national promise to pay exactly what on written on the page, the interest on interest due date and original on the maturity date. So this national bond is the origin where the money comes from. I think this national bond is sits on the top level of the old securities. National bond is on the top level. Later, the AAA class corporate bonds or municipal bonds or state bonds. The national bonds is the top priority or top authority. Even I think it's more priority to the currency, national money and national bond. Both has the same, or at least the national bond is the most. So who has the authority to decide the interest rate? For my opinion, I think it comes from the bondholders. National bondholders decide the actual deciders of the set the interest rate, because they have the decision power to if they have reinvest or not. So I think we, the public, should get back our authority to any way to control over these bondholders. If we don't have any authority over them, we don't know who are the national bonds holders. We know who are the debtors, but we don't know who are the creditors. They are hide behind the curtain. So as a public, we need to get to know who are the most powerful bondholders. Are they Chinese? We know the Chinese hold the most biggest national bondholders. Or Japanese? I don't think so. Maybe Rothschild or Rockefeller families. You know, we need to get knowledge about this. And so I think we need to set the guideline. Government should have the authority to say that, okay, you bondholders, at maturity, we pay you all currency, newly issued currency, or you renew as the original, but the interest rate is fixed, 2%. That's, yeah. You cannot have more than that because our target interest rate, target inflation is 2%. Most of the central banks set the target inflation 2%. But the actual market interest rate for these national bonds are different from that. I think we need to have some way to control over these national bond holders.
Mm-hmm.
That's my idea.
Those are some great questions. Yeah. Wow. So from what I would understand is that the government being able to create the money debt-free, like, in my opinion, the interest rates and those other intricacies kind of fall out of importance because the money would be for public spending debt-free.
Yeah.
But we'll discuss all of those monetary intricacies in future coffee houses for sure. And I hope you will also be joining the American Monetary Institute. So I will once again share my screen. Shoot, can I show the wrong one? Let me do that again. Thank you. Yeah. So just to point out, once again, if you needed to write down those dates for the AMI conference, and also click, that there will be a the 8-page booklet that will be mailed out, and you can access that as well. Do we have any other questions from the audience about today's presentation?
I just want to make one note on this booklet before we pass that. This is just the top page of it. It's actually a lovely little, very professionally done booklet, you know, that opens up into, you know, 8 full pages. We ordered some extra copies, so there's a little bit available for request, you know, mailing you out 5 that you're really going to make good use of. But if we could get some donations for more printing, we might be able to print more copies of it. But there was a wide group of AFJMers involved in writing and drafting and revising this. It was a labor of love. It was a vision that Mark Pash had to begin with. And it was dated on Mark Pash's birthday, which we can wish him a happy birthday yesterday, I think it was. September 13th, and it is probably going out this week as we speak. It's very exciting to 4 different urban centers in 3 states in the country, East Coast, West Coast, and Midwest, and to a bit higher income areas. And its purpose is really to bring the money question to people. As you can see, if you read that, you know, these people who are getting it already know a lot about money. We have Greg Coolidge to thank for this sentence. And he said then, but we suspect you may not be familiar with the story we are about to tell you. And we go on in concise, clearly worded, and thanks to Tabitha and Ryan, really great editing in the final versions. So it's exciting, and it could be very helpful if you have powerful people in your local community to take this to. It would be powerful for some legislative meetings probably, but I would say people in your community, what Alec just said about reaching out to labor unions, the leaders of labor unions in your community, this could be a document that could really introduce people who might get it if they just heard about it. So that's enough on that point. And if nobody has other questions, I know Fernanda has a great little something she might share. Yeah.
I have a question for Fernanda. Is the recording of this going to be sent to us?
Yes, of course. As all of the recordings, they go to our YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to that and make sure that you get it when it's ready. Any other questions? Yes, please check out the chat. We put the link for donations in there. This is the resource that keeps us all moving. This is the resource that we're all fighting to make more just. So please find it within your heart to provide some of that justice to the organization as well. And just to end real quickly, I wanted to share that it's really important when you're in the lobby meetings to, be yourself and tell your personal stories. So this is a little something that I did with our social media page as well. So it's like a cartoon of how I got into the story of monetary reform activism, and it starts over here at the top. This person is like, I'm here to do what I can for the environment. And then I was very motivated to go green. So I joined these activists that are like, there's no planet B. So along the way, I learned that fossil fuels were the leading cause of pollution, and that economic policy was one way to stop companies and people from emitting CO2. As I mentioned, I volunteer quite a lot with Citizens Climate Lobby. So that was when I had most of my lobbying experience. I pushed for the carbon fee and dividends, but we soon ran into obstacles. We've been at this for years. Why doesn't it work? I'm disheartened. I don't think it's working. The elected officials have all been bought out. And then I learned about the issues of dark money in elections with my friends at Move to Amend. And not only was my mission then to price pollution, but also to Move to Amend. So I learned that that was the real obstacle to enact any change. And from there, it's even that money is considered free speech, which is an influence to our elected officials. That's awful. No wonder they think the rules don't apply to them. You can find this whole cartoon on our social media. I know it's a bit blurry here. So then I ran into my Alliance for Just Money and realized that money isn't only an issue during election season. The problem with money goes a lot deeper to how it is created and by whom. So money is a social construct that we can change to take the power back to the people rather than the banks. So now here I am with monetary reform and realizing that the root of the problem is systemic and none of these individual pieces, Move to Amend, Citizens Climate Lobby, monetary reform, none of these pieces alone will solve all of the many societal problems we have. I think change is more likely if we all work together. So this was a little story to inspire other young activists to join the movement and help us reform the system from the ground up. And the pollution problem, the election problem, and many of these other issues will be fixed if we really get to the roots. So thank you so much for joining tonight's Coffeehouse. Some of us will be staying on a little later if you have additional questions. Please follow our Facebook group, and we'll stop the recording now